It real, I want to tell you how relieved we are that you're here this evening. This public forum is new territory for the Queen's College Association, and we weren't sure what the public response would be, but we're heartened that so many of you have taken the opportunity of coming here to discuss a very important topic in our society at the moment, the issue of crime and violence. The Queen's College Association is the alumni association of this school, and we exist to foster relations among the alumni and between the alumni and the school. And we're very grateful to Queen's College for affording us the opportunity of holding this forum in the hall here this evening. We're grateful to the Ministry of Education, Technology, and Vocational Training, who is live streaming this evening's event so that people who aren't able to be here in person will still benefit from the discussion. So we thank them. I'm not going to detain you much longer. I'm going to invite the president of the QCA, Ms. Michelle Daniel, to address you. Michelle?
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. But the chief problem in any community cursed with crime is not punishment of the criminals, but the preventing of the young from being trained to crime. That comes from W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk. Barbados 2018, 8 murders by April. Barbados, February 2019, 12 murders in basically 40 days. Good evening. Let me first extend my personal welcome to all of you to this public forum. It is evident that this is a topic of great interest and importance to you. And each of us here represents a community. We both work and play here. We are either natives or residents of this island. We represent our respective neighborhoods, are a part of the business and corporate community, and in essence, we are all pieces of the social fabric of Barbados. We have a vested interest in the state of affairs and future of Barbados. The genesis of our being here this evening started as a result of a series of WhatsApp exchanges between members of the executive of the Queen's College Association early one morning, a few weeks ago, at the urgent prompting of committee member Mrs. Kathy Daniel, who planted the seed for this forum and proceeded to water and fertilize it to the point where we are today. The reason I am specifically mentioning this point, which may seem irrelevant, is this. Even in our desire to respond urgently and play our part in the active pushback against the upsurge of ills and violence in our island, we also wanted to be respectful of you, the public, and of ourselves. We couldn't just come to talk again. We slowed down a bit to analyze the reasons for doing this forum, what we wanted to contribute to the national debate, and what we wanted persons to be able to take away, to empower themselves. Our consensus was this, that it could not just be talk, talk, talk. Talk, yes. Action, yes. The answer lies in the very title of this evening's discussion, Getting Real About Violence, Demystifying Crime, and Providing Strategies for Prevention, as well as the selection of this esteemed panel who blend the legal, analytical, layman, social, and psychological perspectives, and they will be introduced to you shortly. So this is not a joke. We are confused and disturbed. We are anxious and we are angry. We are disappointed, fearful, and some unbelievably are shocked. The murders are the most visible thing right now. However, they are but one aspect of a general trend. the general lawlessness, lack of respect for authority, for elders, aggressive attacks, robberies, home invasion, the prevalence of drugs, and even petty confusion, which escalates into irretrievable disorder. What is happening is the question I keep hearing. What is the answer? What are the answers? Does any one person have the answers? No. Do some of you in the audience have the answers? Perhaps. Do some of you have success stories of how you tackle crime in your neighborhoods? Or of how certain situations can and should be tackled? I am confident that you do. I quote an extract from an April 2018 Nation newspaper contribution by Olutule Waldron entitled System Too Soft on Violent Crime. Quote, open quote, the reason for this explosion in violence and homicides is that we have become too soft. And those who are minded to commit these acts have recognized it and are taking full advantage of it. The day we toughen up, we will see a reduction in these acts. He went on to say, we cannot continue to permit the society to be ravaged by a minority of violent savages. Now, this may sound harsh, lifted off the pages and spoken aloud, but is that not how some of us feel? In my opinion, there is no one answer. We can sit and debate about the reinforcement of the dormant capital punishment laws and the role of law enforcement, and on and on and on. But if we are honest, the issues and the solutions start much earlier and are much more basic than that. Part of the chorus of the popular song by Jimmy Cliff and several other artists goes, there are more questions than answers. What are we missing? Are some of us living in a bubble away from reality? Are our public and private social programs dealing with the deep-rooted issues in society? Or are we only scratching the surface? Is the changing face of Barbados anything to do with our changing value system, our approach to discipline, or the lack thereof? Materialism? This evening is therefore about us. In this hall, persons in the surrounding areas who may be able to hear the sound of my voice, the voices of our panelists, of our collective voices. Those tuned in to live stream coverage through the Ministry of Education, Technology, and Vocational Training. I urge you to both listen and talk. Join the debate and be active, not passive citizens. For united we stand, and divided we will fall, and continue to fall hard and fast. As I conclude, I leave you with one final quote. It is not a local quote, but I thought it was so applicable. She said, Sheriff, how come you let crime get sort of hand in your county? Sounded like a fair question, I reckon. Maybe it was a fair question. Anyway, I told her, I said, it starts when you begin to overlook bad manners. Anytime you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the end is pretty much in sight. That's from Cormac McCarthy, No Country for Old Men. So, in conclusion, I now return you to our Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Sharon Marshall. Do participate. Do make the evening all that it has the potential to be. I urge all of us here to keep it real. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for setting the scene for this evening's discussion. I want to bring to your attention the microphone that is in the aisle here. You can come forward and make your comments or ask your questions. And if you're microphone shy, someone will hand you a piece of paper. Kathy, who has the papers? Okay, Michelle has the papers, and you can write your question and have someone else answer. The name of our association, as you heard, is the Queen's College Association. It used to be the Queen's College Old Girls Association. But since Queen's College has become co-educational, the old girls have been making a very valiant effort to get the male of the species to participate in our activities. So we're very conscious of gender balance whenever we undertake activities, and since we didn't have an alumnus to serve as moderator this evening, we did the next best thing, and we went to the school. And we asked Brian Lashley, a teacher here at Queen's College, to perform the role of moderator, and I now turn the evening's proceedings over to him.
Pleasant good evening to everyone. Let me firstly say, please feel free to applaud me. Thank you so much. My boss is sitting there. Hey, Dr. Brown, how are you doing? With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the amazing women who have come before me, who have spoken from the QCA, have said, let's keep it real. And for me personally, and for all those who are watching, let's be real. So if you want to clap, if you want to stand, if you want to say something, I think we need to set the tone now. Let's be real about what this evening is. It is a heart-to-heart. It is openness. It is being real. It is being today about what is happening today. What has happened yesterday, what's happening today, and what's going to happen tomorrow. Unless we are real about what's happening. So me just asking you to clap for me, you always clap for one another. We encourage each other. But in actuality, we have to be, in no uncertain terms, real about where we're going, how we see our nation, and what we need to see happening in this beautiful island of Barbados. And I usually say amen, amen, hallelujah. Amen. Want to put your hands together for that? That works too. So now my job at this point in time is to introduce to you these three amazing persons who are here, who will be our panelists for the evening. Firstly, let me begin by introducing Kim Ramsey. Put your hands together for Kim Ramsey, please. Now, Kim Ramsey is a criminologist of 17 years standing. She was trained in Leicester in the United Kingdom in the field of clinical criminology. Ms. Ramsey worked as a volunteer in the Leicester Probation Service while as a student at the University of Leicester with the Black Prisoner Support Project, which was a project aimed at supporting Black prisoners from the Caribbean with issues they faced while incarcerated. On her return to Barbados, she worked as a consultant with Her Majesty's Prison, Glenderry, from 2003 to 2004, where she introduced a cognitive rehabilitation program for inmates. She is presently employed at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit as a senior research officer for the past 13 years, where she conducts research on crime and criminal justice to inform policy. Some of her research included a self-report study on youth crime and delinquency, 2 studies on homicides in Barbados over a 35-year period, recidivism of released prisoners from Glenderry, sentencing in Barbados, juvenile delinquency, gangs in Barbados, and victimization, and 2 public opinion surveys. One on crime and criminal justice issues in Barbados, and the other on the Royal Barbados Police Force. She also worked on a study on job satisfaction among police officers in Barbados, as well as assisted the regional security systems on a study of gangs in the Caribbean. She sits on 2 technical oversight committees on drugs and crime for CARICOM, and is responsible for the monitoring and evaluation of the Drug Treatment Court in Barbados. She has been teaching and tutoring in criminology on and off at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill for approximately 17 years. Her areas of research interests are deviant subcultures, reentry, prison research and violence. Now, Ms. Ramsey has attended and participated in several regional and international conferences on crime and criminal justice as part of her work at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, formerly the National Task Force on Crime Prevention. Her career focus is on criminal justice reform. Now, in her spare time, Kim loves to travel and write. She just published her first book, currently a local bestseller entitled Barbados Most Wanted, which chronicles the lives of 11 of Barbados's most notorious criminals from the 1970s to 1990s. She is currently working on her second book. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Kim Ramsey. And she is a Queen's College alumna. Need to applaud that as well. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Marshall. Next up, Miss Donna Tull Cox. Wave your hand, Donna. Okay, thanks so much. Now, Donna Tull Cox is a counselor, trainer, facilitator, who prefers to guide clients to personal and professional insights through diverse creative techniques. She is an educator who has worked with preschools to elementary through tertiary education across the region. As a facilitator, Donna has applied her skills to a number of programs such as Endless Possibilities, addressing challenges and empowering youth through work experience, Supreme Counseling for Personal Development, assisting parents and guardians with the development of parenting skills. There's Partnership for Peace, challenging male perpetrators of domestic violence to understand that violence is a choice and teaching them self-control techniques. She is the managing director of the Parent Empowerment Network, her counseling company, where she works with individuals as well as small groups. She also holds the post of guidance counselor at the Graydon Seeley Secondary School. Donna maintains high ethical standards as she serves her clients with confidence and confidentiality. It is, however, her role as a parent that gives her the greatest satisfaction, and her children from whom she draws her inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Donna Tull Cox. And last but by no means least, a gentleman who has a beard almost as awesome as my own, my friend and a young man that I look up to a great deal, Mr. Jeremy Stephen. Now, Jeremy Stephen is a trained business and financial consultant who assists business entities with their business and financial strategies. A former economist at the Central Bank of Barbados, he graduated with a BSc Economics First Class Honors from the University of the West Indies Cape Hill campus, where he received the prestigious Charles M. Kennedy Prize for Academic Excellence in Economics. He is a former Commonwealth Scholarship winner, in 2006, and he also completed his MSc in Finance degree from the Imperial College Business School in 2007. His core specialization is in financial and economic modeling, along with web development and financial training, along with financial and business advisory services. These skills were initially honed during his stint at the Central Bank of Barbados, where he was responsible for maintaining the bank's economic and financial forecasting model, and his highly quantitative master's program at Imperial College London. He is also a lecturer at UWE Cave Hill in the economics department, specializing in financial economics and technology. Now, Jeremy is currently the president of the Barbados Economics, former president of the Barbados Economic Society, but I believe he still stands ready to participate in economic, business, and financial seminars and conferences. Jeremy's day-to-day responsibilities include business analytics, web and app development, corporate advisory, management of the internal and external financial monitoring systems, financial due diligence, marketing, and fundraising. He has provided financial consultancy to a myriad of companies, which include the Nation Corporation, Inc., the Caribbean Media Corporation, and the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation, just to name a few. Now, Jeremy is an avid basketballer and football fan. Jeremy, we know what our site is, True Blue. Jeremy's interests also lie in charitable causes and a passion for sustainable economic growth through health care, alternative energy, agriculture, logistics, and tourism. He is now a member of UNDP's Small Grants Program Steering Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeremy Stephen. Now, I've said a great deal about our esteemed panel, but at this point in time, I want to turn over to each of them to deliver just a brief 5-minute introduction, or rather, what their take will be or what their take is on the current situation and the current violent situation that we are here to get real about. And I'd like to introduce Kim, if you would, to get started for us, please. So if you will. Thank you so much.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not known to do brief presentations, but I was given 5 minutes, and I will try my best to speak for 5 minutes. I mean, we can always continue the discussion after, because as I said, I have much more than 5 minutes of notes. Now, okay. I was asked to speak about the current situation of crime in Barbados as my opening remarks. Now, Barbados, along with the entire region, is grappling with an upsurge in violent crime. The Caribbean, and when I say the region, I'm speaking just about the Caribbean. The Caribbean makes up 8.5%. The Caribbean and the Americas makes up 8.5% of the world's population, but we have 27% of the world's homicides. And as was stated earlier, Barbados so far for the year has had 12 murders, which is unprecedented. When I look back at statistics on homicides, we've not had such a precedent so early in the year. But as I said, this is part of the regional problem of violence that we're grappling with. St. Kitts, for instance, had 6 murders in 6 days and a total of 7 murders. Now, this may sound like a small figure, but for a country that has less than 50,000 people, that is quite a huge number. And most, if not all, of these murders in St. Kitts are gang-related. I will not be able to speak about the nature of the murders that we've had for the year. Needless to say, it is still worrisome, considering that more than half of the murders were committed with a firearm. So the region, as I said, is grappling with murders and more so grappling with the issue of firearm offenses. I have stated in other forums that we are at a crisis stage as it relates to firearms. And it is something that law enforcement is grappling, society is grappling with. We are still trying to determine the source of the problem of firearms. We do not manufacture firearms in Barbados. But we do know that there are several variables, several factors that are causing firearms to come into the island. And as the presentation is saying, we are keeping it real. And I would expand on that as I go along. But I want to speak about some of the demographic factors related to violence. We see, based on our research, and I'll speak about some of these issues of a history of abuse. Many persons who engage in violence, when you look at the risk factors associated with their behavior, a lot of them suffer from a history of abuse. They either engage in substance abuse or misuse. They come from social environments which are conducive to violence, either by living in proximity to or in a society in a culture or environment that's acceptable of violence as a solution to problems. We also have the cultural issue of violence, where we have a culture now where violence has become accepted rather than the outside force that we look down on. Persons engage in violence for all kinds of activities, even how we engage in violence in the home, on the streets. We've lost our social fabric, and this is something that current and past governments have realized, that our value system has changed, and it's now time to rope it back in. But the question is, how do we do that? And that is a challenge that we face in our society, especially with some persons who seen beyond, not to repair, but it's a struggle to deal with some individuals. So we start with the preventative measures in terms of dealing with children in schools, primary schools, and so on. Because as you will see, most of our young people, not most, quite a few of our young people, 15, 16 years, 14 years, and so on, are engaged in a lot of violent crimes, both boys and girls. So we have to deal with the issue of violence among our youth. Then there's social exclusion. Many persons in different communities have a feeling of isolation, feeling of no belonging. And that is how we have the emergence of what we refer to as community leaders. In Jamaica, they refer to them as dons, who take over as the leaders of community, and where some communities look to these persons for support. So why do people resort to violence? There are issues of, based on the homicide research we've done, the economic gain, that's one factor. They have a street culture of violence, where violence is considered a norm and necessary to resolve conflict. We have to grapple with the whole issue of masculinity in the subculture, where it is to be a man is considered, you have to display your aggression and your violence. So we have to look at, as we said, deconstructing masculinity in the streets, on the streets for some of these young men. Then there's some persons who engage in violence because of mental illness. So we cannot divorce that as a factor. For some persons, violence has worked for them in the past. They have committed a violent act. They have reached rewards for engaging in that violent act. They've not been punished for it, and their behavior then is reinforced, especially if they've not been punished. So it has worked for them in the past. And there are other situational factors where you may have, and this is a common problem, you may have a conflict that has escalated to the point of violence is the solution to that problem. Now, we cannot look at violence in Barbados without looking at the history of Barbados. And Barbados has historically been a country of violence in terms of our slavery and so on. And even how we, and this may be a bit controversial, the vestiges of colonialism is still basically, we're still wrapped in that vestige of colonialism in terms of even how we punish our children, using the whip and so on. So we tend to have a violent past, and we're still seeing it in how we deal with conflict, and how we deal with even parenting. So we need to shift. Another problem that we see, and which is not working for us, is that our society, and not only Barbados, but this is a regional problem, we tend to use traditional sources of punishment in terms of being reactive to dealing with the problem of crime, instead of being proactive. And this is not working for us. So the criminal justice system, as I said, not only here but in the region, believes that, sometimes we have to engage in building more prisons, punishing more people, locking up. You always hear, the usual story, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. But that is not working, because we're locking up more people, but we're seeing more crime. So we have to look at preventative measures to deal with the problem of crime. So we need to shift from a reactive approach to violence to changing our environment, being a little more proactive in having social programs, empowering our youth, putting programs in communities that are considered at-risk communities. But we need to engage the communities and build projects and programs in the communities using buy-in from the persons in the community, as opposed to implanting programs in communities which may or may not work for that particular community. We also have to look at risk factors among our young people that cause the problems in the first place. So when we are looking at implementing programs, as I said, we cannot be reactive about these programs. We have to look at the risk factors. What are the things that are making these persons more likely to engage in criminal behavior? We also have to look at the protective factors. What are the things that reduce the risk of a negative outcome? So I know my 5 minutes are probably up. as I said, we can discuss it in the presentation, in the discussion part of it, but we need to, as I said, I am a person that's big on prevention. We have to have primary prevention. We have to do visits with at-risk families. Do not wait till the families become a problem, because usually we hear, oh, but I could have seen that this person was heading towards an outcome of, say, prison or even death. You hear teachers saying he was problematic from 11 or 12 years old. When we go into in the prisons and we do surveys, a lot of inmates, I don't have the actual statistic in front of me, but quite a few inmates have said they were kicked out of school. They dropped out of school at 11, 12, 13 years old, and then they end up on the streets and engaging in behaviors that are either delinquent or criminal, and then they end up in the criminal justice system. So we have to work with those young people, those dropouts, those people who are at risk, who are given problems in the schools. We need to do more programs with our young people who suffer from issues like ADHD that we are not picking up in the schools. A lot of our young people in prisons have these attention deficit disorders and special needs that are not coming to the attention of because some people are just not trained to detect them. So as I said, we need to work at primary prevention, do assessments in the communities. Each community is different. What is going on in community X is not necessarily going on in community Y. So we need to do, as I said, needs assessment, look at the strengths of the communities, the needs, implement programs in the communities, and as I said, put ownership in the communities. But it must be a collaborative approach, because crime is multi-causal. We have to look at law enforcement, education, public health, faith-based organizations. We tend to leave out the church and religion in a lot of our programs. The NGOs, businesses in the community, because you may have a parent who's struggling, who should be in a program, but she or he may not get time off from work. So as I said, you have to bring all players in if we really are serious about fighting this crime problem.
I have to say thank you so much, Kim, for, if you look over at the board, you've given 2 pages so far, and as I said, we're documenting as much as we definitely can here this evening. But thank you so much for your start, and definitely you've gotten us set us off on a very, very interesting path. I know there's so much more to come, but at this point in time, we want to thank you for your opening remarks, and we're moving on to Donna Tulcox. We invite her to give her opening remarks as well from her particular perspective from the counseling arena. So.
Good evening, everyone. In keeping it real, I'm going to start by saying something that may upset some people, but we have got to stop seeing violence as somebody else's problem. It is our problem. And if we look at ourselves, we are violent, point blank. I'm going to ask you, just today, how often did you hear cussing of somebody else? How often did you cuss? You don't have to answer, it's rhetorical, okay? Because, some people have to testify, right? How often have you heard words that literally grate your skin thrown at you? How many of you were driving today on the highway and got cut off and just smiled and say, God bless you? We don't do that. And if we don't say something, it stays with us until we have a chance to let it out on somebody else. Now, when I say it's not somebody else's problem, we tend to look at violence in association only with crime. But violence in what we say, do, speak, even how we say good morning. Have you ever gone into some place where you know that somebody had a problem and you said, good morning, good morning, and just grates your skin because it's a violent greeting? So what happens is this. We have something called the fight or flight syndrome. And because of that, we are additionally sensitive to threat, whether it is a real threat or a perceived threat. Nothing is really happening, but you feel threatened. And your body reacts to that. Okay? Some people feel it right away. They know their jaw clenches, their heart races. You feel it. Now imagine feeling like that 24/7. and then acting on that because of the way you feel. Now, the problem is your fight or flight syndrome does not necessarily happen because you are angry. A lot of those symptoms could also come from other things: hunger, fatigue, being ill, being hurt, thinking about what happened to you before, hoping for something for a very long time and not getting it, a feeling of entitlement when you really don't have the resources to gain access to what you think you are entitled to. And put all of that into a child in a home whose adults, parents, older siblings feel the same way. And the slightest thing can trigger a violent act. Now, we're not talking crime yet. We're just talking a violent act. We're having AgroFest this weekend, and I could bet your bottom dollar that in 1 hour, if you're observant, you will see over 200 acts of violence towards the children to start. And I don't mean 6 and 7, I mean young children. Shut your mouth! If a child is hot, tired, and hungry, they will cry. If you slap the child because they are hot, tired, and hungry without addressing why they're crying, that's a violent act. And that child takes that violent act and that fight or flight syndrome, and they hold on to it. When they get old enough to hit back, they will. When they get old enough to say that RH word, they will. And the response and reaction to that will either train them or breed them into more violent tendencies, or train them or breed them into suppressing it as a victim, only to have it explode later on when they are faced with a real or perceived threat. What I notice in schools, and I am attached to one secondary school, but I go around and I see children in many schools. I see children who are no longer in school. They should be. I see young parents who are still children, should be in school, but they have children of their own. And there's a general tendency right now in 3 main areas. The first area that I see that I'm quite concerned with is that violent acts are not the purview of young males anymore. Females are surpassing a lot of the males in terms of their fighting, and not just fighting to get their honor if their honor has been stolen. I mean, let's face it. Like I said, we're violent. I remember growing up and a boy pulling and flexing my bra strap. Okay? And in vexation, I would turn around and fling something or chase him down until I can hit him back. We're not seeing that kind of fighting anymore. We're seeing the kind of fighting that's calculated to just pull you and your reputation down for the rest of your life. So when the girls are fighting, they are not just slapping. They're ripping each other's clothes off to expose breasts. They're pulling the hair to pull out chunks of hair, whether it's weave or real. That's what they do. And when they've got a handful of your hair, that's good. They have won. Okay? The boys, they will fight too. A lot of what we excuse behavior as boyish stuff. But what we're noticing a lot more is that the boys are fighting not because the person they're fighting is a real threat to them or has done them an injustice, but they're proving themselves to other people so that they will not be a target, so that they can join and belong to some group of people who are going around committing other violent acts. So you will send to school your child who has done nothing wrong to anyone, and somebody will come along and pick on that child to fight so they can prove to somebody else, yeah, I am worthy of hanging with you guys. So we're seeing that too. But for me, the most disturbing thing was sitting down and talking to various groups of children who said that they do not leave home unless they either have a weapon or they go someplace where they have already planted a weapon. And we're talking young children. We're not just talking the older teens. Okay? So you have people that say, well, I always have a knife or an ice pick or scissors or something. Why is that? Because you need to have protection. Protection from what? Okay? Protection from what? And they stop, and then they just say protection. And that is real. Now, as a parent, I've got 2 children. My daughter, she's now in another country. She's going to be 23 next month, and I started when I was very young. Very young. And my son, he is 15 now, and he's in secondary school here in Barbados. As a parent, I worried about my children. But I worried not because of what they might do to someone else, but because of how they might react if someone did something to them. So from a very early age, I instilled a confidence level in my children so that when they were faced with certain types of acts of violence towards them in school, they stood and held their ground. Because most of the people who are violent in school and trying to prove to somebody else, if they cannot get to you, they will move on. And starting the confidence in that frame has helped them to increase their confidence level as adults. My daughter, like I said, she's 22 years old now, and she can stand up for herself. But she also knows when to stand up for herself, how to stand up for herself, and also how to de-escalate a violent situation because she can read the signs. So when we're looking at acts of violence, knowing how to read the signs and being able to stand your ground, those are some skills that you would have. But what if you don't have those skills? What if nobody has taught you those skills? And that's what we're faced with because, like I started off by saying, we are violent. Most of the time, the adults in our society will tell children, not necessarily their own children, because I find that people have agenda, but they will tell children, don't let anybody unfair you, fight back. They will tell children, hold this peace, because you need this. They will tell children, rough sex is the way to go. And this is children we're talking about. And if you see some of the videos that are circulating about children, you will realize what I mean. Even in the most intimate act, it is still a violent situation. So, in keeping it real, let's look at what we are doing. Noise is another factor. When was the last time, I know in here sounds really peaceful, now if I stop talking, we can actually hear things in the distance. Most of the people on this island live in a situation where there is constant noise. Constant noise. Noise fires you up. Your fight and flight syndrome is fired up. So you may think that, okay, it's the middle of the night and your children are asleep. No. Most of the noise that our young people are hearing comes through these tiny little buds. So they're having noise directly in their ears. You can't hear it, but they can. And they're constantly fired up. So when something happens, they react. And as Kim has said before, we've got lots of people who are in prison who talk about the fact they were abused when they were younger and things like that. All of that is so true. But you know something? There are more people out of prison right now than in. And the violence is out here. So let's keep it real. Let's look at ourselves and don't look at other people because violence is not just somebody else's problem.
Indeed. So very thankful for that, Donna. Indeed, let's keep it real. Kathy, you're okay over there? Good
Sorry,
stuff.
Kathy.
That's another 2 pages? Okay, 2 pages. Wrote smaller. See, we're learning as we go ahead, taking notes, and we're preparing ourselves. Thank you so much, Donna, for that enlightening opening. And if I must say that I've learned some stuff even from what she was saying, some stuff I didn't know about before. Thank you so much. Now we move over to Mr. Jeremy Stephen. Now, from his perspective, what's your take on this entire thing, Jeremy? The floor is yours.
All right, good night to one and all. I would actually say that although I buy the noise argument that was being made by Donna just now, pretty much it might mean that I should be the most violent man in this room because I live in front of the airport my entire life. And there's no rest at all when you live in front there, but nonetheless, it's a point well taken. I am not a criminologist, nor am I a guidance counselor. In fact, if I had done those things in my life, I might have gone mad. However, you might want to turn this one up. Right. So however, am an economist and more so a finance guy. And the point of view that I view the acts of violence in Barbados, the trends and such, would come from that background or be informed by such. I would say that I have to thank Kathy for actually following some things I've said about it online and thinking I can make a meaningful contribution. And whilst I agree with many of the points, with all really, the points that were made before, let me add a spin to it. So how many of you have been to Glasgow before, Scotland at all? Right, very few people, but certainly to have been to Chicago, probably Boston, Los Angeles. And those are cities that, for the long and short of it, have had histories of violence going back millennia. Scotland in particular was a pretty violent place and also had a pretty violent history. Los Angeles, for many sociological reasons, racial mainly, was very violent. Chicago had a history of violence stemming from the Prohibition. And of course, why did they say Boston? Boston, it's just Irish people, so you take what you get. But on a serious note, Scotland began about 10 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, a very interesting unit called the Violence Reduction Unit. That borrowed very heavily from like home oil industries in Los Angeles, and I think another operation out of Chicago. And what they decided was that they wanted to start viewing the many knife stabbing incidents and gang-related incidents that they had in Scotland as an issue of public health, which is a very interesting approach. And I heard very much the pieces and bits coming out. Okay. And a lot of us, yeah, but you did say so, but a lot of us in the room don't view violence as really a health issue. The same way you view a cold, the same way you view transmission of HIV, the risk associated with it, the cultural factors that purport and promote, let's say, violent and careless sex that can lead to even further transmission, you would actually put different steps in place to help stem those tides. So the way I view this violent uprising in Barbados has a lot, yes, to do with the economy. I'm not going to deny that. But also a blatant disregard by us as Barbadians to recognize the problem at its roots for what it is, but looking more so at the end result. So I'm just repeating what Donna essentially just ended with. If we treated this as an issue that is very much public health related, you would start recognizing that, again, collectively, each of us have to play a role with respect to going into communities. We also have to hold the police via the AG accountable with respect to community policing, which is a dead art. There were, when I was a child, many moons ago, many attempts to do neighborhood watches. That's basically dead. Communities very much are insular now, and dependent on the median income in Barbados and dependent on the types of communities, you get less interaction for the benefit of said community. Furthermore, if you are to deal with the issues, if you are to stem the transmission or the prevalent transmission of violence, government spending has a lot to do with it. So in Scotland, for instance, a greater part of their budgets have gone towards policing, community policing, education within the community, community-driven events. And those, unfortunately, are tied to election cycles in Barbados. You cannot solve a problem without actually doing this on an annual basis. And there's a lot more that comes from that. And as we expect that government itself will continue to contract expenditure in the near term, it really would take the average Barbadian telling themselves that this problem is mine. It's like the common cold. The same way how when I know the flu is going around, I would, in theory, go and take my shots and prepare. I would try to enslave my children. I would try to educate my children as to the proper way of washing their hands. And the school would do so, and you would take care within yourself and within your community. The same approach we would have to adopt to ensure we stem the tide of violence. It can happen. We can't, however, rebuild a culture. I have to accept that, people cuss in Barbados. I have to accept that people are vulgar. If I am to reverse that, there should be no crop over. And I know nobody wants to make that trade-off. I mean, there's a part of and that's my 5 minutes to just end. There's a part of our history that is both beautiful, contrite, and essential to who we are. What I do propose in closing for now is if we want to deal with the problem, we just view it slightly differently to how it's being viewed. It doesn't have to end up in prison. It has to deal with the cradle to the grave in terms of education and enamoring our children and pointing our children in the right direction. So if you don't want to stop jumping for crop over, I'm saying we accept that violence is a part of our society. We accept it is. We look at what the issues are stemming from that violence. We look at what we can curb. And really, in closing, I speak to Japan, a country that I could not understand at all until I went there for an extended period during the summer. And if you read a lot of Japanese history, it's shredded and shrouded in violence up to the, well, not the Cultural Revolution, but definitely when you read about Empire Japan, the Japanese Empire, and what they did to China, it was inherently a very violent society. But no, within the last 20 years, crime is basically non-existent. You can leave anything. I left my iPhone in a restaurant on purpose just to test it. And walked away for about a half hour and came back and it was there in Tokyo, in one of the world's most crowded cities, in an area where the stealing should have happened. That did not happen overnight. That happened again. The Japanese had a similar approach, but it was very much shrouded in their values as a society and how they educate their children from young. Japanese children are taught the importance of community by one simple act. It has nothing to do with what they learn in the classroom, but what they do after school and during lunchtime, which is everybody cleans together, cleans up their own mess together. And that simple act is amongst about 12 more I'm aware of that they use to actually educate children from a very young age about what I do has an impact on me and has an impact on everybody. If I leave this classroom dirty, it impacts my potential health, it impacts my learning. You build that semblance of responsibility. And now, whilst Japan is not the perfect place to emulate for many reasons, nonetheless, there are bits and pieces out there that speak to one common thing: us acknowledging the true root of the issues that we have. Thank you.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I almost wish I wasn't a moderator and didn't have to stand here. But I wish I was like in your position now, where I had the opportunity now to really and truly ask, speak, and really start to drive this mouth-watering conversation I know so many of you are so eager to get into. Of course, you have your panelists here. The microphone is there, ladies and gentlemen. And as we've all said, let's be real. As I tell my class, people in my class, I don't have any stupid questions. There are no stupid answers. Not me modify that. There are no stupid questions. But what we do need is to have a heartfelt question, a heartfelt understanding of what's happening. Some of us have been touched by violence, and some of us may still be thinking that violence is not so near to home. Whatever your situation, we do invite you, ask the question, and let us all thrash it out together. I would even add my particular spin, my particular twist. Let's all be solution-oriented. Let's all have a mindset that we want a solution and not a quarrel. I repeat that. Let's aim for a solution and not just a quarrel. Can we all agree on that? Can we all agree on that? Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Who wants to go first? Let's not all rush. Kathy, you want to go first? And Kathy's going to the mic. She'll set the ball rolling for us as we really start to get real about crime and violence.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm accustomed to going first. My maiden name is Branker, so you're top of the list. You'll be. What I would like to ask everyone is to take all of the presentations into account and think of one thing that we can change. Something, I love my mom dearly, but my parenting style is very different from hers. So what can we do, even if it's just one thing, to change? Something to empower our children to be better people. So, that was my question. I can leave you with a story that I hope will get things going. When my son Nick was about 6 years old, I quarreled with him for something I thought he had done. I later found out he had not actually done it, and I went and I apologized. I had quarreled with him in front of some people. I went and I apologized in front of said people. I got looks as though I had grown a new head. It was like, will you apologize to Aoife? I'm like, excuse me? First of all, it's the right thing to do. I was wrong. So I don't know, the ego thing. I said, no, you apologize. And more than that, I wanted that when my son became a man, he would be man enough to apologize when he was wrong and not be caught up with this, you have to show off and be the bad John and whatever the term is nowadays. But I mean, so that was one thing that was different for me. But so how can we help our other kids do this? What can we do to help the parents who will train the children?
Thank you so much. Kathy, I don't know if anyone, the panelists want to offer a reply.
Okay, I'll take that one. First of all, one of the things I'd like to be able to say is that we focus so much on the youth for everything, especially the negative things, that we forget the older adults as well have the same problems. So one of the things I'd like us to look at is to stop just developing programs for the youth. Develop programs for us all. We all need a campaign teaching us certain skills in communication, conflict resolution, not just the youth. Recognize the signs that you are getting angry. We tell people, control your anger. But how could you control something that has already gotten away from you? Okay? Most people do not recognize when they are angry. They only recognize when they have lost their anger. Adults need to know this as well. So if there's anybody out there, please develop programs for all of the Barbadians.
I don't have any children, but I have a spin on this that may be of interest to parents. All right. Despite my public proclamations, I do not believe in reinventing any wheels. I believe in using mechanisms that are there to further any agenda that may be made as possible. I honestly think that if you're going to focus on soft skills, it's not just the duty of the home, because unfortunately, we presume that we are educated, we are a literate society, but literate just means being able to identify a very few words, right? Doesn't mean that we have soft skills. And those amongst us that supposedly have those soft skills are either within the private sector, within government, in other roles, taking them outside of the use of those soft skills, or the teachers within schools. And it is my core belief that if we are to introduce those skills, we utilize that mechanism. That being the teachers and those responsible for let's say, channeling information. So when's the last time we heard Lil Rick talk about putting down the gun? That's not enough. Putting down the gun doesn't mean stop being angry. It comes into messaging. It comes into actually curating a particular message from their point of view. It comes into the teachers enforcing certain values day by day instead of saying, I ain't want to deal with them. I've heard too many at my alma mater, and I always hate having to do this at QC. Too many teachers at my alma mater, Combermere, stating that my problem. And unfortunately, from the time they do that, every time they literally say that, another Combermerean is gunned down, because the actor guy from Badness is an alumni as well, right? Another Combermerean is gunned down. I'm not saying that they're directly correlated, however, you just happen to see these things. Another person is gunned down when you tell yourself you that have the skills do not choose to intervene because you're not incentivized to do so. Unfortunately, the truth remains, because I live in a neighborhood like this, that there are parents who are not built to cope. If we have a national program to deal with that Fine, we can do that through the welfare office. But again, we are a proud society. Nobody likes to admit they've got a problem. That's why you hardly have an Alcoholics Anonymous in Barbados. All right, we do not admit to a problem. Yeah, we got more rum shops than solutions, right, in this society. So why I'm thinking about this actually stems from a little case study I came across a few years ago. How was it that in America, that you had more white people in the 1960s and 70s supporting the civil rights movement under a certain age? And apparently the authors, I don't remember when I saw this study, but about 10 years ago, the authors attributed it to those Superman cartoons from the 40s and from the 50s. The gray ones when he had the black S, the black and red S, like those real old ones for anybody here older than, well, definitely me would remember. Right, but no, I'm just trying to make sure it's very clear that all the rooms should say yes. But and my age and younger as well. But nonetheless, he didn't battle any aliens from outer space. He battled the Ku Klux Klan. He battled, and this was part of the radio show, he battled Hitler. And he battled a whole bunch of different things, criminals. And you had literally a radio program that was very popular in the 50s, espousing these values into younger children. The radio was training these children to think that civil rights matter. The radio and public and well, what we would call social media, no, but definitely media in general was training children to behave a particular way. And honestly, I think that is what we have to do. It could be in the schools, it could be just an agenda being pushed on public areas, it could be pushed on social media. It could be pushed within the community. I actually believe the community approach works better in Barbados as well. So I think, and I'll really close on this point, I don't think it's a case of where you challenge masculinity. I don't know if that's the point that you might have been making, Kathy, I don't know. But I think it's a case that if you want to influence behavior, us that are more mature and seasoned and older have to commit to doing something, but where we fall short, we have to allow those that have the means to teach and to influence positively. And I just think in Barbados, we currently don't accept that behavior. We don't, right?
I just want to add one last thing.
Just one thing, Donna, real quick. For those of you who may want to ask questions and just want a bit of paper, just raise your hand and indicate so we can get a piece of paper to you so that we can have those questions written down and someone can pose them for you. Sorry, Donna, please continue.
I just wanted to say that I actually, every time I go into a classroom, I do not refer to students as just boys and girls. I always go and say, good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And the response that I get is like, wait, who's she talking to? The first few weeks is, who's she me? And when they get used to it, then you can see some of them sitting up. Too many of our young people and older people are beaten down. So that's another thing we have to look at. Using words to empower and lift people up. You know, not everybody is sweet girl. Sweet girl got a name. Use it. Sorry.
Kim, you have any way in on this?
No, I'll wait for the other.
I know I see some people feverishly writing. Of course, if you're finished with your question, just indicate that somebody will pass around and collect those papers from you.
Don't be shy, you know.
Hi, good night.
Good evening, sir.
I just want to get some clarity because I heard some conflicting remarks coming from the panel, the desk. You said that you made reference to slavery and you somewhat connected it to the violence that's happening. Stephen? Right. You made reference to the Japanese and you spoke about their history, which was violent. But you said that they're disciplined. So I want to get some clarity. Is it the violence, the historical violence? No, I'm saying you made reference to the Japanese and you said that they are disciplined now because you left your wallet somewhere.
Well, not because they left the wallets. I left the wallet somewhere, but nonetheless.
She said that she connected the discipline, the violence to slavery. So I find a little.
No problem, sir. If I could offer clarification. Again, I wasn't disagreeing with where Kim was going.
Okay.
I'm saying where we did not deal with the problem, Japan sought to deal with the problem early. A lot of it comes from a few factors. I spoke about the school, but I can speak about the fact that they have no religion. That also help them in terms of reform. And the explanation behind it is that I don't know if you guys noticed the Bible, for instance, or noticed or have ever read the Quran or read the Torah, but pretty much most religious books are fairly violent. Think about, no, read the Bible, like really read the Bible without the passive emotion your grandmother put inside of you. Striking somebody blind. There's a lot of very violent words in the Bible, you know. It's subject to interpretation, but again, if you take it literal, for them in Japan, it was more about honoring people, honorific, being very honorable. So it was put into practice fairly early on. Not that you smite somebody or you disregard somebody's presence, but you honor them. So the fact that you can walk into, as a black person in Tokyo, this took generations for them. Walk in there and people bow and you don't see it as being forced, but that you were just a human being as far as they're concerned. That took a while. They dealt with the problem, and they did that through the school system and promoting certain behaviors. We haven't necessarily done that. We talk about, I'm from that age group where the Boys on the Block program started. I'm from that age group. Most of those guys will either be just slightly older than me or around my age, late 30s, early 30s, right? And that always was trying to give the boys something to do, but not to how to cope. So fellas around my age still feel pitching their hand across some woman's face or the girlfriend's face or wife's face is a way to settle a dispute. And then there's a toxic masculinity too that very much is prevalent. The fact that men, for instance, can't say sorry, right? The fact that we are told not to say sorry from young. Those are the things that Japan dealt with in terms of culture. So I'm not saying that the histories are different. The only difference is that they decided since the 50s or so, or 60s, in an effort to reform their society, just like what Germany did as well coming out of the World War II, that the efforts they did to reform their society led to basically violence being not non-existent, but very trivial thing over there.
So you're saying that that slavery, then you're saying that we haven't done anything to curb our violence, therefore slavery is responsible for it?
I'm saying it is responsible. What I'm saying is the root cause, the root issues that we're looking to deal with are different. So for instance, the Great Arab Barrow decided that one of the ways to uplift for ourselves was free education, right? You would admit to that, free education for all. But that education never taught us how to deal with our emotions, but gave us a lot of knowledge. I'm just saying that we dealt with issues that allowed us to bury what is now coming to fore now, given the prevalence of social media, given the fact that our children are influenced by all forms of different factors from outside. We never dealt with those root causes, so it's very difficult now to pull back. That's what I'm saying. But so I'm not disagreeing with anything Kim said at all.
That's my final point. Have you all heard about the broken window theory? Yes. I'm sure you would have heard about it. Mm-hmm. How relevant is that? For persons who might not know about it though, it is like trying to nip things in the bud, let's put it that way generally, before they escalate into a bigger issue. If you see a car with a broken window, you try to get out of the area, because if somebody comes and breaks it, you're going to see them breaking cars all the time. How relevant is that to our society? And that's my question. I'll just go back to the back now.
The broken windows theory is a theory that I believe is a theory that you can see in most communities, because it is about leaving a community in a state of disrepair. And as you said, as people continue to see that nobody's doing anything about it, they will continue. Just to elaborate on his point, you see a community, let's not use Barbados, let's use Tivoli in Kingston, where you have a dilapidation, there's nobody that seems to care about the community, and people will continue to basically discard the community, dump garbage, break windows, as you said, graffiti, etc. That is an important point that you've made, and we do see elements of that, as I said, in all societies. The important thing is that you need to, as you said, empower the communities. That's why up to today in our office we were discussing about beautification. You have to empower communities, give them a sense of pride, get persons in the community to basically uplift their community. What people tend to do is they wait on persons to come and do it for them. But our suggestion is empowering. We're all about empowering communities. Sometimes you need that lift to empower the communities. But it is, as you said, a symptom of one of the issues in criminality, where you leave a society uncared for and persons will continue to discard and mistreat. Back to your point before about slavery. We are shaped, our past is shaped by a past of slavery. We cannot have any programs, we cannot look at any without looking at our colonial past. We were products, generational products of slavery. Nobody has ever been counseled. We have that culture of slavery, whether we want to admit it or not, is still ingrained in our psyche. And as somebody said to me just a couple of weeks ago, in the state of emancipation, there was just emancipation, but what did we do with those who were part of slavery to basically rehabilitate, to treat to the fact that you are now coming? We just left from one stage of slavery into freedom, but the old behaviors, the old mannerisms, the treatment, being shouted at, being punished, being beaten, still remained without being treated to it. Don't you think that will then pass through our generations? So we see it all the time. And then we had the black male who is accustomed to seeing the black woman mistreated. She too is accustomed to being mistreated, and she and he have not been able to divorce that behavior out of themselves. That's why, people always talk about black violence, but the reality is that blacks have become accustomed to violence because of their colonial past, especially in the region. They have not been able to, as I said, adapt to a post-slavery mentality.
No, sorry. Dr. Marshall?
Yeah, I just wanted to put a plug in for Dr. Brown and the program of the Caribbean Ideal Person that is being undertaken here at Queen's College. Dr. Brown, I don't know if you want to say a few words about the kind of values that you're trying to inculcate, because there was talk about the role that schools can play in making a change.
It is part of the values-based education thrust here. In 2011, I got the idea. You can go on the CARICOM website. There is a document called the CARICOM Ideal Person. I have the major precepts over here on the wall. And the CARICOM has a government ministers at that time. I think it was the Granzan Conference in Grenada. We came up with this document. And the idea was to create a Caribbean ideal person. If you read the document, you will feel that they want to create a perfect person. That is not what it is. If you live in a region surrounded by water, people should be interested in the marine environment. If you live in a region, and we hear talking violence tonight, and we always get the impression that Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago now and the Eastern Caribbean becoming so violent, you have to have a respect for human life. It is a very simple thing. At this school, there's nothing called the Caribbean Ideal Person as a course. It is incorporated into the delivery education. Every week we have a theme. We still give the old theme of values. This week it is discipline, and we are looking at respect for human life under the Caribbean Ideal Person. I speak to it on mornings, to these concepts on the platform. Then the form teachers are supposed to reinforce it. And when we have year level assembly, the year heads reinforce the concept for the week. Now, it is very difficult to measure it, but I got very interested in it. One day I driving going up Lower Graves, and there was a debate out of Parliament, and I was hearing the then Prime Minister Frondell Stewart saying, the school must be family. In other words, is the idea that a school and our system is a social panacea. Everything that society wants solved, you always hear, it should be taught in school. I've heard credit unions, I've heard conflict resolution. We got overcrowded curriculum, and everything that bothers society must be taught in school. We can't teach them more. But it occurred to me that at Queen's College I can introduce this concept. And let me tell you something. I went to a conference in the Bahamas 2 years ago, and I heard the Deputy Chief Education Officer in the Bahamas saying, "Oh, I wonder if we can get the Caribbean ideal person incorporated into our educational system." And I say to myself, you late. I've been doing that one at Queen's College ever since. I've seen that we must make a greater effort. In other words, I got the impression the Prime Minister then was saying, looking towards the school to do more to produce the sort of citizens. If you see in the hall, in my lobby, the core values, when we wrote our strategic plan, we pulled them out of the national strategic plan. And it speaks to productive citizenship. Ask the children in Queen's College what is productive citizenship, and they have an idea. I am convinced that we are producing the sort of students we need out there in the wider world. Now, let me say in closing, we have written a number of pledges. I wrote a pledge I read at the beginning of school and at the end of school term. The deputy principal, the teachers, the PTA, and everybody. When I asked the students to write a pledge, they wrote one. It was by the senior students, and in their pledge, they mentioned the precepts of the Caribbean ideal person. They are listening, so they have incorporated it. We have a situation here of a student who only came over from St. Albans and he died. You probably heard Nigel Haynes. I am convinced that preaching these values are getting through to the children. Mr. Haynes only went to school here for 3 days. He was very sick. He had leukemia. Those children raised $3,300 towards his medicine. Teachers went and gave platelets. And they are going to attend his funeral on Tuesday in droves. And they came to me today and said they want to raise more funds towards the burial. I'm convinced that it is getting through to the children. And that is what it is all about here. I want to say that education is more than certification. I passed that ever since. I am looking to contribute to turning out from Queen's College students. As a matter of fact, I said something a few weeks ago and the Nation misquoted me, or at least the journalist. When I said that I'm preparing students for the CSME world, what I meant is that I have to produce children who I know will go and compete, not only in Barbados, but in the region and the wider world. When we constructed the Cape, that in 1996, I was one of the first panel members. That is what I perceive, that students being turned out of our schools must be well prepared, not only academically, but who can fit into a global world. So when Americans were talking about 21st century skills, we were trying to put certain skills in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Now I have a couple questions here that have come to me, so just bear with me. So the first question is, regarding change in culture, is this a lost generation, and where do we start? I'm going to guess where that starts. Where do we start the rebuilding process, or how do we start over? Is this a lost generation, and where do we start? Feel free. Who wants to tackle it first, or do we? Anybody from the audience want to tackle it? See panelists looking at me. Kim, you got something to say? You go on, girl. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've heard that expression so often, lost generation, and it bothers me because my children are a part of a generation based on their time of birth. I'm a part of a generation based on my time of birth, and everybody's a part of a generation. And regardless to whether or not people are doing good things or bad, if you lose a generation, it means that they're no longer there. They're wiped out. I see loss as being not there, and they're always going to be here. So we can't describe anybody as a lost generation. However, what we can say, and what I often say, is that they have lost their way, but they have also lost their spirituality. Now, I'm going to tie in something that Kim has said, and somebody asked about with slavery. When slavery happened here, and our ancestors were brought over, our spirits were broken deliberately to meet the agenda of those who enslaved us. And although freedom was given, our spirits were never built back up. Okay? Because it was not a part of their agenda. And if you don't understand the effect that that has on each and every one of us here tonight, I want you to think about what happens when somebody says, "See my snake? Put it around your neck." Most of us will run, scream. We've never been bitten by a snake yet. But we are fearful of that because way back in our ancestral history, people were afraid of snakes. And if you want to get even something smaller, a centipede.
God have mercy, you had to mention.
See? Okay? I've never been bitten by a centipede yet. But guess what? One can't get near enough to me because somewhere in my spirit, centipede want kill it. Okay? And that is a part of our DNA. So unless that gets repaired, unless spirituality is addressed, and it is not, we are going to have people feeling so disconnected because they will never feel as though they are a part of something bigger than them, which means that they actually matter. We have a lot of people saying, "I ain't care about you, your mother, I ain't care about life, you are nothing," because they don't see them as being connected. They don't see them as being connected. So I can't say that the generation is lost, but I will say our spirituality needs to be repaired.
All right, so I'll be a little twisted, just to go back off of the slavery thing, because I'm actually glad that Kim drew that distinction tonight. So we were emancipated from slavery and expected to adjust on our own. And yet, the tool that was used, one of the 6 or so tools I'm aware of that was used to enslave people, and this might sound like I'm hitting at the church, but also showing why the church is rather important as another institution in society outside of the school. The church was used to enslave. A lot of us to this day, amongst us that have these views that the others are lost, pretty much uphold views that were the views of the slave master. So just to talk about trauma being repeated through the century, literally, I know a lot of people would not agree with me on this, and I literally don't care. But the truth is the truth. Every morning, every time the children read things like the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in heart and that kind of stuff, or not poor in heart, but poor in whatever, it's poor in spirit. Just to show you haven't really read the Bible in so long. No. When you repeat this stuff, you basically pass on through generations a sense of trauma or enlightenment according to how it was used. So this is why, for instance, almost every generation in Barbados has been a lost generation. Barry, remember when we was at school, how people used to think about Springer Girls? You see Father Barry laughing, right? You remember? And who has a real stellar reputation now? Springer, right? Every generation is just different. I think, again, if we understand the commonality between the generations, nobody should talk about generations lost, but rather it's been influenced in a slightly different way to how you've been influenced. This generation can be educated without your supervision. I hope you know that from the time you put a phone in their hand. This generation, unfortunately, do not have across the board vested interest in the sorts of Dr. Brown. This generation is not educated by CBC TV. In fact, I don't know any of my students that watch CBC TV, even if it's for the news, right? This generation just is stimulated differently. In fact, the parents of this generation are less driven by the Bible than the ones from before. So when you're looking at the values that they have, although a lot of it is steeped in slavery with respect to how you commit acts of violence. Because there are things that I've heard my grandfather, my paternal grandfather doing with respect to women that these young fellas doing now still. You would think that they're awfully different. But I just think that they are stimulated a little differently. So these fellas are joining gangs. I think that was inconceivable when I was in secondary school to be part of a gang. When I heard there were Crips and Bloods in Barbados going into my time at UE, I was almost shocked. Like, where was the community spiritness that could stop these young guys from looking to need to be a part of this? But it wasn't there. I could even speak to the fact that the changing structure of family, I know George would love to hear me say this part. No, the changing structure of family actually commits or has influenced this a lot. We've always had single parent households, but you had support from your grandparents. You had support from vested interests, so values were easily passed on. Your children are being raised by people who might not be as motivated. Obviously, those people don't teach at QC, according to Dr. Brown, right now. And I'm not misquoting you, sir. Just having my fun. I'm having my fun. I'm having my fun. He did not say that. But the point being is, you have less of a certainty of how your child is going to be influenced in this society now. And it's going to get even worse if economies fall or if persons are expected to work longer and harder hours. If even, let's look even further into the future, because this is where now my brain really gets ticking. Let's assume, for instance, that you guys ever heard of something called Universal Basic Income, UBI? All right, so it's a concept that says in the future, eventually most people won't work. So the government will have the responsibility for giving some form of stipend to people because most jobs will be replaced by technology, AI and whatnot, right? So under the semblance of UBI, if we don't deal with our issues and people aren't given money in a fair and equitable manner, and we don't deal with our issues right now, what could happen to this perceivably, well, what we think is happening to this perceivably lost generation is going to be a monochrome compared to what can happen in that future. All right, so at the end of the day, I challenge the people of Barbados not to view these guys as lost generations, but rather that we, the generations before, lost them. We lost them. We failed them. We had the opportunity to deal with the root issues a long time ago, and we continue not to accept it as our responsibility.
I'll just be quick because I can see my friend there is on at the mic. I want to begin with how Jeremy ended. We failed them. I do not believe in discarding an entire generation because I believe that, and I'm going to be very careful with how I say this, in many situations where you see a deviant child, there is a deviant parent. There is a deviant environment. The child did not wake up and become like this overnight. I often say, what we see in our society is our mirror image looking back at us and telling us we have failed our children. Now, the media tends to focus a lot on the negatives among our young people, what criminologists would call moral panic, and basically making our children, young people, demons, demonizing them. So every fight that goes on is put on. But back in let me say something. In the 80s when I grew up, I used to see fights at QC every day. Sorry, QC, but it's the reality. Especially down by the tennis court, down by the cage. Fights every day. I see people burst people's head with desks. And these people you see, you would never believe, but you see them in banks and in big institutions nowadays. But I remember. But what happened is there was no camera, there was no phone, there was no social media, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram. So what is happening nowadays, as I said, the technology is perfect, it is beautiful, but it can be demonic, because what it is doing is making our young people look bad. But it is just that, as I said, what we are seeing is just a continuation. However, saying that, we still have some of the problems of yesteryear today. We still have the poor parenting skills. We still have the poor environments. We still have the parents who believe that the school, as Dr. Brown said, should be raising the child. We still have removed the village as, you know, the days that you couldn't pass down the road and you have to speak to so-and-so and don't let your mother hear you and speak or you're getting beat. Don't happen anymore. So we have a lot of things that happened in our society no longer happen in our society. And that's why I began my presentation by saying that society has basically lost its way. So while people are very quick, as I said, and I'll be very quick to just throw the baby with the bathwater, I do not agree. I believe and I think that our government, this current government and the past government, have acknowledged that this is something that we have to look at. We have to look at parenting skills. We have to basically let parents know, no, parenting is not easy. It is not. It is one thing you're never taught how to do. But it is such an important skill to have, because parents have to realize that they're the primary agents of socialization. As somebody said, they're the ones, as a parent, you're the person who is responsible for unleashing that person into society. And when you fail to do that, or you leave it for another agency to do, then the problems begin. Some people become too busy in their lives to realize that their child is going on a road to hell. And by the time they're halfway down there, it's too late, because the behaviors have already been inculcated. And you know, and it is too difficult. And as I said, then we tend to want to lean on agencies to bring it back. I mean, just yesterday, for instance, I was speaking to a police friend of mine, and she said to me, Kim, if you were to hear the calls that come into the police station, you'll be surprised. People calling there and say, come for this child from in my house, because I ain't listening to nothing I say. So the police are supposed to parent your child for you. Or, she gives me another example, parent calls and says, this child ain't going to school, so come and get it and get him to school, because I send him to school and no one go. And then she asks, how old is this child? 6.
Good job. Sorry.
And 2.
Their parents out there that say, this child ain't listening to nothing I say, and they throw their hands up in the air. Probation department will tell you about situations where parents pack a bag and drop the children at probation and say, come, you deal with them. So these are the realities that we face. And then, as I said, they end up in the criminal justice system as for the criminal justice system to deal with. And by then, as I said, sometimes when you become an issue, when you enter into the criminal justice system, that's never a good thing. So as I said at the beginning of my presentation, we have to deal with prevention. Don't let it get to that. If you realize that you're having problems with your child, you know, you have to sit and develop a relationship. I'm not saying to be friends with your child, because a lot of people, you know, they want their children to be on a friendly basis with them. But you have to start from young. You have to get your child to respect you, and you respect your child, and quality time, which a lot of people do not do. They don't believe that quality time is important. You know, some people want their children to be raised in front of television. Television cannot raise your child. So these are some of the realities that we face, and we see it a lot in our criminal justice system when people, you know, when children end up in juvenile liaison scheme, they end up in Somerville. I mean, Somerville is a whole, you know, especially
Barrels.
Barrels.
Sorry, Kim.
Yeah.
No one cut you, but I know there's so much more to come. I know I have questions there that are specifically aimed at you, your expertise rather. But I want to get a young man off his feet here. If you want to pose your questions, sir, make your comment.
Well, don't know where to start all of a sudden. But I want to reiterate what was said about this lost generation thing. I'm sorry, there is no such thing. All the wickedness of the past is current. There's nothing different, nothing new under the sun. What we have to see is that there are things that we can change, as Jeremy said, which we have to work at. One of the things that lead to violence is people feeling inferior, and therefore they have to prove a point. And we have a system, an educational system, that promotes this separation and this stigmatization. And it continues and we are persisting with it. So we have an 11 plus exam, which stigmatizes children and promotes this distance, and we continue to promote it. Children are passing for schools. Their parents are disappointed from the time they hear that the child passes for the school. And they are not, therefore, working with the school that the child goes to help this child along. The school itself, I mean, I wonder how the teachers at these schools manage. Imagine you are given the task of teaching a class of children who got 10% in the common entrance exam. Where do you start? How can you not expect them to be violent? After all, the teacher gets vexed to have to start in front of them. He can't draw on one to show an example to another. I mean, we need to review these things because this is part of what is really at the meat of the problem. We are not seeing children from Queen's College involved in the violence, in the main.
Really?
You are seeing children from schools and villages and areas that there is a consistent line in the main. And these are the things that we need to work at to change the thing in our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution, sir. I just want to get a sheet out of the way, not out the way, but there's some comments here that I just want to point out. And the first comment is that meaningful use of words is important. And I think that really comes out to say that so many times we just say things so flippantly. And we don't have there's no weight behind what we say. And I think that's important, that we need to change that. Next thing is that many students do not study history. I'm just going to leave that right there. In this general history, many people don't know, let's say for the Caribbean and the Barbadian context, they don't know who they are as an individual, where they've come from. But you can ask them something about the American Civil War or what's happened in the World War and whatnot, but many people do not know the history of who we are as a people. And then the last comment, because it's a question, I want to let you ask your question, is that sometimes really and truly need to acknowledge our problems and issues, not just accept them as they are. So now I'm going to invite you please to pose your further question or make your comment.
Good night, everyone. And this is with some concern that I am here tonight, because I first want to congratulate Queen's College Association alumni for this initiative. I want to congratulate you for that. Now, in response to Dr. Brown's statement with regard to making the ideal Caribbean person, we conducted a study. That's the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit. Kim is ably representing that department. And we profiled the prison. And we recognize that there are a number of schools overrepresented at the prison. 3 in particular come to mind. And so I want to find out, how can we transform or transport that model that Dr. Brown spoke so eloquently about into schools that have children who only had got 5% in the common entrance. We also did a study, and it showed us that persons incarcerated were functioning at the reading level of persons of age 4. How can you pass through an educational system from age 5 up to age 16 and you are reading at the level of a kindergarten person? How can you? We also have to look at mental illness and its relation to offending. We have a number of our persons incarcerated at prisons who have psychological problems, psychiatric problems, also at our government industrial school. Someone spoke about the broken window theory. It does not only speak to the social disorganization at the community level, it speaks to being able to intervene into a situation, into a life before it gets unmanageable. And I think that's where we drop the ball. We are expelling children in Barbados at age 13 and 14, and they are the ones who are ending up in our criminal justice system. We have to look at our educational system. We spoke a lot about parenting. Yes, parents have a role to play, but we also have to look at the support systems, because where parents fail, it is responsibility of the state to step in and do something about it. So we need to focus in that direction and see how best we can manage the criminal justice system in Barbados, as well as some of the issues that we're seeing among our young people. And it's not going to be solved here tonight. It's going to take the entire Barbados waking up and ensuring that something is done about our children and what we are seeing happening, not when they reach prison, but when they start presenting the issues at a very early age. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. We have the gentleman first,
Yeah.
and then the lady after you, please.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
I came here tonight with a very heavy heart, and I'm going to start the ball where Kim left off. Because, as Kim said, and the lady said just now, I happen to be a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather. Okay? Now, some time ago, I saw a child was home. I wanted to know why this child was at home. I called the parent, and I found out. I said, what happened? I saw the guy walking about. I said, what happened at your home? I got expelled from school. I said, why? The headmaster sent me home. Now, as Ms. Ramsey said, there are some schools in the north where this lady just said that has a very funny reputation. I won't call their names.
I don't think she said a school in the north.
No, I am saying. I just
want to be very clear on this particular. Excuse me, sir. Let me just finish this thing. We don't want to put any. You don't want to put the QCA in any particular issues. So let's just be a little more general.
I'll be generous.
Thank you so much, sir.
I didn't name the schools.
Because there are some very lovely schools in it.
But listening to Ms. Ramsey and Ms. Ford, there are two particular schools that carry a very bad stigma. And as the lady said, children at 14, 13 end up in the prison. Why are these children end up in the prison? Everybody can say the educational system, but a part of it comes from the school. Now, I go on a little further. When I inquired, I went to the school. I took it on myself, and I went to the school. I drove to the school. We went, the gentleman spoke, good morning, I would like to see the principal. When I asked to see the principal, he said to me, I mentioned what had happened to this little youngster, and I said, why is he home? Oh man, he gets trouble. So he is home. You expel the child from school, the educational act says for 10 days. 10 days, the child is at home, he's walking all about, could get in any mischief, end up in the police. And when the 10 days is up now, the child returns to school. He spends a day in school, or 2 days in school, and you expel him again. He goes back now, and after I inquired from the principal, he said, why are you here? I said, I saw the little boy at home, and I asked, why is he at home? Well, we expel him from school. We give him 7 days or 10 days. He goes back to school. You do the same thing again. I took it on myself, and I went to the Ministry of Education. And I outlined the case to the Ministry of Education. They said, take him back to school. We would call, and we would say, well, Mr. Principal, or whatever he wants to say, this child is expelled from school, you're expected, after the second expel, to take him back in school. Principal look at me and says, man, we all could afford to go to the ministry, but I have the school board to back me. Now, this is what I want to deal with. If a child is at school, and you expel the child from school, would you not call the parent before you do this? Or would you write a letter to the parents if you feel the child isn't going to give the parents the letter, and let the parents come into the school and find out from what is the problem with the child? Okay? You don't do this. But he says to me, I could go to the school board. I got the school board to back me. Now, the problem comes in, and this is the big issue, where Miss Bess, Miss Addison, their teachers, some people might get vexed, but you could remember the two unions. So I don't back you, you don't back me. You got a post in the ministry now, so I'm a teacher, so I'm bigger than you, so you should feel I should not speak to you. So this is part of the problem, right? So the other thing I want to know, you have a guidance. You ask them to learn a trade, they don't want to learn it. They don't want to learn it. But the other problem comes in. I can wrap it up just now. Because we have a problem where you have the non-academical inclined. And this is one of the greatest problems I think we face. And Mr. Ramsey would tell you. You find out that you have children, they're not academically inclined, but the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic was set up to help these children because some of them are gifted. They might not learn early, but some of them are gifted and make good trade men. But you find out that we have a style now where you get children that has 6 and 7 O levels entering the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, and these children are left to the block at 14 and 15, and we all get down on them and say they don't want to do anything.
Very much, sir.
Um, I'll be really, really, really quick. In terms of suspensions and expulsions, there is a protocol that is tabled from the Ministry of Education. There are different schools that adopt it in various ways. Not every suspension is an external suspension. Some suspensions are internal, where they're suspended from going to class, but they're still on the school premises. When the situation gets to the point of expulsion, it usually means that there has been massive intervention over quite a period of time, and the child's behavior isn't something as simple as just being rude to a teacher or maybe slapping someone. But normally, if it goes to the point where it goes to the board for expulsion, it's usually a series of things that border on the criminal offense. Case in point, in our schools, we do have students who sexually assault other students. And we do have, yes.
I has the educational act home.
Very good.
Home. I read it even before I went to the school. I make sure I read the chapters, particularly so that when I go to the school, I can discuss what I want to discuss.
Right.
But here comes the problem. Before this child is expelled from school, this is what I'm asking. Has the school written to the parent and asked the parent to come into the school?
Okay, now, can I continue? You're talking about a specific case, but in general, there is protocol, which does involve the parent, and it involves the parent time and time again, to the point where some parents decide, I ain't coming back there. Do what you want to do.
Sir, if I may interject at this point, please, and I must say this. We have repeated respectfully that there is a protocol. We do not know what may have arisen in your particular case. There may be someone in this room who may be able to assist you in further investigating if there was a breach of protocol. But if I may be as bold as to say, I would entreat you to inquire with someone. There's not want to put Dr. Brown on the block, but there are avenues to continue or find out exactly if there was a breach. But we are saying there is a protocol. They will not just put your child out on the street like that. But unfortunately, sir, we need to press forward, not being disrespectful. But I will advise you, please, if you would, if there's anyone in the room who has more experience in this particular case than I, who will be able to assist. He's in prison now, then I would say, sir, there are still people in the room who would be definitely able to assist the Indian situation. Next question, if I may. As I said before, please stand. You have a question? As I said before, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to be very hard and fast, no disrespect intended, we are here for solutions, not to quarrel. No disrespect. We are here for solutions, and we will entertain everyone, but we must, at the end of the day, come to a consensus of moving forward together. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, your question.
Hi, good night. My comment or contribution is more along the line of solution as well. I am not a parent, but I am a social worker, and my work is focused on families trapped in a cycle of intergenerational poverty, from which many of the youth or the children that we're talking about come from, at-risk youth and children. And the problem is sometimes, or the problem's so big and so overwhelming, or some of the things we're talking about here, and it's like, what do we do, or, how do we tackle it and attack it? And I just want to encourage everyone to have the mentality that I can reach one, or what can I do to save one family, one child. And as you leave here tonight, think about the child you see on the street or the parent or the interaction that you see that you think, why would you speak to that child like that? Or you know that something is going on in your community, or you see a parent that is abusing a child, or you see and you know, but for many of us, we go in and close our doors and have our families, and we know how to do it better, and we do it better in our homes. But I think if each one here, each family here can say, you know what, that young lady, I'm going to target, that young man, that child, I'm going to invite over to my home this weekend. This family, I'm going to invite for lunch on Sunday. And as you are modeling behavior with your family, because you know how to do it right, you know how to say, or you don't say, sit down there, shut up, and hear whatever you say to your child or your young child, you go down low and say, what's wrong, or tell me. And as they see that interaction, it's like, wait, there's another way to do this. There's a better way to do this. And I think if we all just look at the one and we say, this is the family that I want to impact, or then it starts a ripple effect, because there are more good families than bad families. So what everyone or every person in Barbados or every church or, there's so many groups or whatever. So what if every family says, I'm going to adopt one family? Then, that makes a ripple effect, and we see a better community.
That's a very good point. Yeah. I just want to say something very quickly. I agree totally with you. And I believe that when you do some kind of intervention in a child's life, especially a troubled child, they never forget. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. One of the campus friends guys, I interviewed him in prison. And when I talked to him, he constantly spoke about his teacher at school and how disappointed he is that he failed his teacher. Mm-hmm. And he said, Miss Ramsey, this one particular teacher, because he got kicked out of school, he got expelled. And as I said earlier, you see the pattern, because there's so many of them up there who got kicked out or dropped out. But he got kicked out for bad behavior and for violence. And he said this one teacher sat down with him and said to him, I'm not going to fail you. I see the road you're taking, but I want to work with you. He told me she was his food and nutrition teacher, because when he committed the crime, he was a chef, because he then went into that kind of, and he said that she used to call him and check upon him and so on and so forth, but for various reasons, he went astray. And he said just before she put him down to do CXC, and he got into some fight and got expelled. And then it was downhill from there. Because when he committed that crime, he was only 17 or 18. 18. But he said his teacher is what he sits and thinks about all the time on death row, as the person who could have made a difference, and how disappointed he is. And he actually told me to call her and talk to her about what type of person he was, because he said, had he paid attention more, he knows that he could have been further, because his teacher said, call him aside. And he said he remembers it all the time in his cell, when she said, I do not like the road you are traveling, and the road you're traveling is going to take you to prison. But he said, being a stubborn person, he wasn't being hard-headed, he did not pay attention. And now, where is he now? But he did admit, though, that she comes and visits him and still, try to give him a pep talk and so on. So I said all that to say that there are people who make a difference in your life. Unfortunately, in his situation, he still ended up in trouble, but there's always this one person, this mentor in many other situations that can make a difference in someone's life and literally pull them from the brink of disaster just by showing them they care, because a lot of those people up there have never had anybody to show them that they care. You'll be surprised how many people said they've never had a parent who showed any any interest in them, whoever told them they loved them, they cared about them, or anything like that. And they looked for the love and attention on the block or in other communities or with other people, and it ended up in trouble.
I just want to make one quick comment. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you so much for your contribution. That was amazing. One quick comment before we ask. We have our next person to the speaker, the microphone. Sorry. One of the contribution is there was a secondary education program in 1995, funded by the Caribbean Development Bank, and a critical element was parent education, and then the funding ended. And it said that the ball was dropped on parental education. As a comment, I'm not sure exactly where, how or why the funding was ended, but one clear comment is definitely ball was dropped on parental education. Really good. At the end of that period, program comes to an end. It's up then to the recipient entity to continue the program. So if there are no funds going for it, that's it. Okay, so indeed funding ended and the program was not continued. Please.
Okay, yes, thank you. Actually, I was going to say parent education was one of the solutions I was going to put forward. Anyhow, there are two problems that I'm looking at here. One is that violence is very popular. It's become very, very popular and accepted by the younger generation. And even for my generation, it is sort of tolerated. We're passively tolerating it, and we don't always recognize it. And I think, as the young lady said here, we're not getting involved enough to help anyone to try and make a difference. So by doing that, we are passively tolerating some of this violence. Violence is popular, lewdness is popular, and extremeness, if that is a word, is popular. Let's do everything to extreme. So anything that isn't extreme is not interesting to young people. So therefore, it's not going to capture their attention. Things like good manners, respect for law and order, there's nothing interesting in that. It's not pretty, it's not exciting. Yeah? So we have to find a way to make it popular, to make it seem to be the thing to do, and it's not old-fashioned. Good manners shouldn't be old-fashioned. It's just good to do. It's the right thing to do at any age. Those are some of the things that we need to do. When we talk about our roots, the things that happened to us in the past, unfortunately, a lot of the efforts to educate us into our history. When I was at school, we didn't learn West Indian history, no, or African history or anything. I remember Dame Elsie. She gave me my first insight to Caribbean history, and it was so interesting. But that was in third form, and I then went into sciences, and history was a thing of the past for me. Yeah? And we had about 2 classes, I remember, that dealt with Caribbean history. She said she was introducing it into the school now. I thought that, wow. But, that's how, and I didn't do history in 6th form, I did geography. I mean, not in 6th form, to O level. But however it is taught, however you hear it, it makes you angry. You are angry about what happened to you, what happened to your ancestors. And we always, we talk about our Christian roots. When we're counseling, when we are trying to mentor people, we tell them, your mistakes or the hard things that have happened to you help make you stronger. But that's not how we talk about our past, though. That's not how we talk about blackness and our roots. We talk about it to make us angry. Be angry with the colonizers, be angry with anybody who's white, be angry with, we don't say, you know what? That is something that should be making us stronger. And we're going to move forward as a strong and very proud people who have made it past that. And we can do anything now. And I think that's why we're so violent, because we are so angry about everything, about us being black, about us being poor. Let's try and make those things build us up. I mean, there's a lot more I'd like to say, but I know there's a lot. Yeah, we're short on time, but those are my two things.
Thank you so very much.
I think that, and back to what I said at the beginning, I think that we have now developed a culture of violence where it is, and even how we speak to each other, the aggression and so on. For instance, this whole thing about big man, I teach at UE, and I have a student in my class who never addresses me other than big man. And I have, yes, a male. But he talks to everybody in the class like that. And I mean, even, I first heard the term from my niece, actually, on the phone talking to her friends and calling them big man. So then I realized that this is a common terminology. But as I said,
it is.
We have become a culture, as the lady said, there's no, when people speak to you, no good morning. I see people get on and come in a public room, or they come to somebody to buy something. I want $5 and something. No, I don't hear, you seldom hear that now from people in a particular generation. So, and it has become, that's what concerns me, it has become culturally accepted to speak like that, because there are few people. Maybe I had a discussion in the office just because I remember my colleague Madupe, who's here, saying, you should put ground rules in your class. When a student comes in and you say something and but big man, I agree with you saying, and I'm like, that's not supposed to work. But why should I have to tell, because he looks like he's in his 20s, why should I have to tell you that you're not supposed to speak to a teacher like that? You understand? So we have a lot of work to do. I call it a cultural shift in terms of behavior, but I believe that we still, as I said, should not throw away the baby with the bathwater. We should still try to work with our young people and try to basically reestablish good manners and good value systems in our young people.
And I'd like to say something really quickly about the history and history making us angry. It seems as though the only black history we have that we talk about, or we push to the children, stems from slavery. We had a history before we were brought over here. And if more people were to address that, we were kings and queens. Our ancestors are not slaves. We're kings and queens. And if we start to look at that aspect of history and then join them, maybe we could take the edge off of some of that anger.
Thank you so much. Sir, please.
Hi again. Just a quick observation. It seems to me that the broker window is slavery is the broker window for black people. If you use that type of analogy. But good night, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Elcott, and just want to take a different spin on crime. I run a program called Refuse to be a Victim, and I go around to some of the neighborhood watches and different community groups, and a few schools I've been to speak on the topic of refuse to be a victim. And it is exactly what it says it is I teach you to change your mindset, to start to begin to think of how to refuse to be a victim, how the things you do are the things you don't do, which makes you an easy target for criminals. One of the things that I hear often in communities is that policing, I think we have to change the way how we think about policing, how the police do their jobs. It always amazes me that an institution that is there to serve, protect, and reassure is so not well liked by communities. People hate the police.
They don't like to be policed.
Sorry?
People don't like to be policed.
People don't like to be policed in general. I agree. Mm-hmm. And but some things I hear things which I think the police has to change the way how they themselves think about policing. For instance, I go to a neighborhood and people tell me, up the street, 4 houses were broken into, but the people at the bottom of the gap don't know that. So they can't prepare themselves, they can't do anything because they just don't know. There's no information that comes from the police that says, look, there's a string of burglaries going on in your neighborhood, and you need to do something. You need to take action, you need to prepare, you need to, that's the type of thing that I think the police has to think about differently. I actually witnessed a shooting. I was actually too close, really. And I called the police and said, look, I just witnessed a shooting. And the lady was like, okay. And I expected her to ask me, how many shots were fired, where was the license plate. Nothing. She never asked me like that. I went to the police on another occasion to say, I live on the West Coast. ZRs and those vans on the West Coast have blinding white lights. And the policewoman said to me, you know what? Write a letter to the MTW. But they have laws on their books that speak to too bright headlights. So that's the type of thing that gets people angry. The community policing, as Mr. Stevens said, it's a thing of the past. I heard the commissioner of police in Jamaica and in Trinidad say they have to get back to community policing. They have to get back to community policing. Well, what are we doing in Barbados about community policing? What are we doing in Barbados about neighborhood watches? When I started this program, there were a few neighborhood watches. There are a lot less now. We have to start neighborhood watches again because people aren't doing the things they need to do to protect themselves from criminal activity. People are now installing sophisticated cameras and surveillance systems in their homes. And we're catching faces, sometimes mass face of criminals in their homes. So what happened in the US? When people started to install surveillance systems, the criminals would come during the day. So they had to amend the books to put a lock, something called home invasion on the books, because home invasion is when you're at home and the criminal's breaking in. Because the criminals figured, and they were right, when you're at home, you turn off your surveillance systems. Because if you happen to open the door or window, the system will go off, so you turn it off. So criminals figured, well, your surveillance system is off, but so he's coming in now. So there are a lot of things that you can do to protect yourselves from being a victim of crime. Think about the things that make you an easy target, the way you walk, the way you carry yourself. I always tell my daughter, and yes, unfortunately, and I say it's unfortunate now, but it's too late, I gave her a phone. And I always tell her, do not walk with that phone in your hand, and definitely do not put earbuds in your ear when you're on the street. I had a female told me once, she had a niece who was on the street walking down St. Michael's Road, earbuds in her ear, guy approached her from the back, put a knife to her throat, robbed her, she got a little nick on her throat, but you see, her self-awareness was gone because she had her situational awareness, her awareness of the physical space. She didn't have it because she was listening to music. If you're going running on the street at night, think about running on the side of the road where the traffic is going the opposite direction. You probably can understand why you want to do that. Because if anyone tries to abduct you and force you in a car, they gotta go in the, you understand? So it's all these little things that you need to do that can help you to not be a victim of criminal. And the program is called Refuse to a Victim. I'm on Facebook, Refuse to a Victim Barbados. I give you free advice. What I try to do is to repost a lot of the crimes that are reported in the media, so that people are aware of what's going on, especially missing persons. So that people know, if you see the missing person, you know to report it. I also give tips on how to refuse to be a victim. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add something to what you said. I live in a neighborhood where we have a loose neighborhood watch, but the one thing that we do have is we have a chat. Everybody who moves into the neighborhood, they get put on the chat. You don't have to put your name, you just put your telephone number. And anything that happens, we pass it around to the point where I had to ask my husband the other day, so where have all the malicious people gone? Because before you used to have somebody would sit in their window, and if you come in to see everything, we no longer have malicious people, but we have the WhatsApp, and you would get 4 or 5 people telling, listen, I just seen some suspicious activity around this particular house. If it's your house, you know what to do. All right? So we are looking at different ways that we can do things, and that's one of them. Thank you.
I still have a piece of paper that's been in front of me for a while, so I just want to get these off my plate. So this one, definitely for Jeremy. The economic situation and the link between the upsurge in crime. Of course, a person wants to know what's going on there, and then I'm going to link that with the economic situation and the link between the upsurge in crime. And I'm guessing question is there, with the current economic situation, is there a link between the economic situation and the current upsurge in crime? And then another question asks, I'm going to try to put the two together. Then I guess why are there any why the drastic upsurge in crime? And is this just a Barbadian phenomenon or something happening across the region? So economics, is there a link between economics and the upsurge? And also, is this just a Barbadian phenomenon or something happening across our region?
All right, so I will break protocol and answer the last question first. Something I hate when my students do that, but definitely the way the person asks the question, you need to deal with the end first. And I will say that it's not uniquely a Barbadian situation at all when it comes to the region. In fact, I really think we're catching up to expectations, right? If we look at the region, again, you must remember, and I do pay homage to when I hear good comments being made, when Kim said very early on, that the region was defined by violence. Well, he didn't really say that, but that's what I got from it. Defined by violence, But pretty much Barbados was civil for a very long time, and these upsurges in violence, notice I didn't say upsurge because within the last few years, and I think I read a comment, Kim, that you made in the media, well, through the media, I should say. Because misconstruction is really a funny thing. But where I believe what was said was, we've had a rapid set of upsurges over the past few years for sure. And a lot of it, I think, is partially tied to more things than just pure economics. Again, it's the social fabric that has changed. I won't say deteriorated. Society's changed. I don't necessarily believe that they deteriorate. But the economic factors are still rather pervasive. When there's a direct correlation between joblessness and an uptick in crime, but not necessarily one between domestic violence and an uptick in crime, although it has been spoken to that the more frustrated households become, the more people act out. The more people have familial, financial issues, the more people act out. So they could lead to those other forms of violence, for sure, domestic violence and whatnot. I would state some factors for you to consider, however, for the person that asks the question. Although this is probably the third of such upsurges in the last 5 years that I'm aware of. This particular one at the beginning of the year is unique, not just for the number of murders within the year thus far, but rather the rate, what you would call the homicide rate per 100,000 people. I would have gone on Facebook because of interest, I really thought the spate of murders were coming too close, so I did a little calculations on my own. And in January, our homicide rate per 100,000 was more than Trinidad. In other words, if you had to take out the size of the population, let's say that was not a factor, and you had to look at how often people were being murdered, Barbados, we were really ahead until rather recently, because Trinidad has continued on their normal stead. But it did draw a distinction to many things. Some people are saying that, there's an obvious void in some communities with respect to opportunities to make money. Some people have said that there's an increased targeting of persons within communities by other rival communities. Some people simply say that the dope dry up, right? Some people are saying that dope dry up and people got to get turf wars. Some people are saying if you decriminalize marijuana, of which I hold this view, that a lot of this related gang violence will actually fall. There's a lot of data from throughout the world that shows that. I am not talking about the other social issues, but obviously that particular bit, there's data that shows to it. So the economy does have an impact, and I do believe that the economy does really have an impact, a significant impact on any spates of violence that you do have, for sure. Kim, you want to say something?
Yeah, in response to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, while I agree that research has always shown us in the past that, poverty is one of the determinants of crime, we have not done any empirical research in Barbados to basically conclude that the rise in crime or the crimes that we've been seeing in the past couple of years are directly related to the issue of unemployment and other financial factors, so economic factors. But based on my anecdotal, from what I've basically seen happening for the year, I'm not speaking about last year, and basically hearing about the types of murders and what's been going on, a lot of the murders that we've been having are turf wars, which I cannot link to joblessness and unemployment, but it is what it generally happens between communities who are warring for various reasons. And most of the murders of last year as well were of similar ilk. Now, disputes coming out of our homicide studies, a lot of our murders are dispute related. Disputes for various reasons, disputes for trivial reasons. You'll be surprised what people kill each other for. I have read some of those murder files and I'm like, that is why there was a situation where a man stabbed a man because he spit food on his, and it was an accident. Because some spaghetti flew his mouth on another man. And he killed the man for that. Men have killed each other for gambling. Men have killed each other for drinking arguments. So to say matter-of-factly that it is because of economic situations without the data or the evidence to support that, especially as it relates to homicides and the shootings, I would not venture there right now without the research. And I think that maybe it is time that we do look at that type of research to determine the role of the economy in, because murder is not the only crime, obviously. There are robberies and there are other types of crimes. But as it relates to homicides, because I can speak about the homicides, as I said, a lot of the homicides, and it's similar to what you're seeing, they're structural issues. I would not say they're issues of unemployment and so on, but they're structural issues with issues like poverty, which I would not attribute generally to the economy per se, but because, as I've said in other fora, there are some people who do not want to work, even though there are opportunities for employment. They will tell you, I am not working for the money you work for. I can't do nothing with that. $400 a week is nothing for me. I can't buy the Timberlands and the boots that I want with that kind of money. So I think we have to be fair, but I agree that it is timely that we look at the role of the economy in terms of the crime that we're seeing in Barbados.
Kathy, if you could give my indulgence, and this isn't a direct response, but rather, and I hate to use this word, edification. All right, so I agree with you 100%. The research is lacking. Hence why I was saying I felt this particular things with turf war related more than economy. Back in 2004, I did a study, and this is the problem, working papers and never really published for the central bank, about estimating the size of the underground economy, right? Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, some of the things that we found. It was myself and another economist at the bank that we found in our estimation. Basically, if you had to take the size of the underground economy, which you estimate using some econometric methods, so take it with a grain of salt, but get the anecdotes that came out of it, right? What was said is that the size of the underground economy in Barbados is actually larger than the normal economy. Definitely. Firstly, to begin with, that's something we figured out. If you add it, it could almost double, in a sense, or just about double the size of the economy that we have now, the $8 billion above board economy. And a lot of unemployment, or voluntary unemployment as the case may be, was linked rather heavily to that same underground economy of which is that size. And what then, to just really close now, what then we found was that we didn't link the violence, the acts of violence to this, but we did say that a lot of criminal activity basically doubled the size of the economy. So if there's any form of unemployment on the above ground, above board, the normal economy, that it could be filtered into that economy as well. So whereas there's no correct or no agreed upon correlation between unemployment and any upticks in crime, definitely the size of the underground economy in Barbados is something considerable, definitely considerable, and those effects have to be looked upon for sure.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. We have to wrap up, but this has been even more enlightening, terrifying than I expected. I want to leave us with a positive thought. My son Nicholas started playing rugby at age 10 or 11. That started a whole crazy ball rolling, and it's been a wild ride. I have met people from all over the world. I mention rugby because one of my dear friends, George Nicholson, who is too ill to attend this evening, asked me to mention the role of female PE teachers in schools, as opposed to having boys taught by males. He mentioned that, he did a paper and all this stuff, so contact me afterwards and I can send you a copy. I can tell you from personal experience of being involved in rugby in the Cayman Islands and in Barbados for the last 12 years, rugby can change lives. It's a sport that is so full of discipline. And it sounds funny to say, but every year we have this international tournament in December. Last year we were supposed to get a team from Argentina. They were ex-cons. They were taught to play rugby in prison. And this is, various ages, all over the age of 18. I think financial issues, but I know there's one guy who, he asked for his prison sentence to be extended so he could take part in a particular tournament. It sounds crazy, but there is a discipline there that is instilled. You have to call the officials sir or ma'am. You cannot get away with the nonsense that you see in other sports. I know of one young man here, and I can tell you, I was the under-19 boys manager for 4 trips overseas. Me, the coaches, and 22 insane teenage boys in Mexico City. It was interesting. But there was a bond built, and I can speak to that. We were talking about that between the teachers and the students, people that reach out. Because so many of our young people, and I can speak only to the males at this point, are lacking, they are starved for affection. So that is why they are so magnetically drawn to the gang mentality. To be honest, I call rugby a good gang because there's very hierarchical, there are strict rules to be followed, and if you give somebody too much trouble, he will flatten your butt on the pitch. The good side of it, though, is that you have to leave all of that animosity on the pitch. You can't bring it off. You will be dealt with and you won't like it. There's a family bonding that takes place. I'm Auntie Kathy to, I don't know, about 30-something young men. I go somewhere, Auntie Kathy, and I'm like, hi, can't remember your name. All joking aside, our young men, I'm only speaking to them at this moment from my experience. There was one youngster who got busted for marijuana a couple years back. And the first thing he could tell anybody was that he used to play rugby for Barbados. He and I had a little private chat the next time I found him. I'm happy to say that he has literally turned his life around. He is now one of our leading lights and teaching the juniors, teaching the school children who are coming up. Because we told him, I said, look, you got to make a choice here. What do you want out of life? Because if you go down that road, it's not going to end well. Sport is one way you can get some of that youthful enthusiasm out in a positive manner. So it's something to look at that we really need to stop making sport about sport, renovate the stadium, in fact, blow it up and start over. And make sure it's big enough to play rugby in. And that's it, I'm done.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up at this point in time. All those that may have had outstanding questions, I see there's a question here about the in-house suspension. You can either contact myself or another educator. I see somebody pointing at Dr. Brown. Sorry. Afterwards, about the structure of the in-house suspension, I can easily tell you it's nothing willy-nilly. It is extremely structured, not to disadvantage the student in any way when they're away from the classroom. But at this point in time, I'd like to invite our MC back, and she will wrap up this evening for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. You did an excellent job of managing the discussion this evening. The goal was to get real about violence, and I think we managed to do that. Demystifying crime, we heard from the panelists about some of the factors which lead people to a life of crime. We spoke about the situation of the economy. But this forum was also about providing strategies for prevention, and we heard from a member of the audience who actually works in that area of preventing you from becoming a victim. We had some suggestions from Kathy about sport. We heard of community policing, the reintroduction of community policing, and we had a very impassioned plea to start somewhere, start with one person, one family, that each of us can do something to prevent crime or to help young people not go down that road. When we wanted to advertise this forum, we needed to have a sponsor for our ad in the newspaper, and the company G4S, they have a desk right there at the back, and they have on display some security tools and literature, so please take the time to go and see what they have. If you want to wet your whistle before you go home, there's water at the back, and you're welcome to have a drink of water, and you can engage the panelists further. But it's not my task to say thank you. I'm going to turn that over to the person whose brainchild this forum was, and let her give the formal vote of thanks. Kathy?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an experience, hasn't it? I hope we all learned something new. We all have a different outlook. To be honest, that was my goal. I thought, if, like the lady said, if we can change one person's mind, that's where it starts. But not to keep you back any longer, I would like to formally thank Dr. Brown and the Board of Management of Queen's College for the use of the school facilities, all the staff who set up the hall, and especially Mr. Brathwaite. I think Mr. Blades was responsible for the IT setup and making sure everything was running smoothly. Those are the folks who work very quietly in the background and don't, in my opinion, get enough acknowledgement, so thank you. Our panelists, Jeremy Stephen, Kim Ramsey, Donna Cox, our MC, Dr. Sharon Marshall, and our moderator, Mr. Lashley, G4S Security Systems, and the folks who helped us get the word out there, Bajan Things Email Marketing and Tell Barbados Email Marketing. The QC executive and members, thank you for spreading the word. The QCA, executive. The good people at CBC, any of the media that are here helping us to spread the word, because you got to start small and then multiply. Keep it going. And last but not least, the audience. Thank you. So I'm going to leave you with a question that I was inspired to ask by Kim. In other words, I really stole it from her. What are we going to do differently now? So think about that. Good night.